Thank you very much, Bill. Our next speaker will be PKoufopoulos, and he'll be speaking about seafood safety as well. Thank you.
Well, I want to extend grateful and thanks to COL for the invitation and the ability to come and speak before you all this morning. It's interesting listening to the dialogue before we actually started today, and then the presentations that have happened already, is the common theme and how some things are all interconnected, and we all seem to be saying very similar items, and we keep focusing on the underlying premise of the population and how much food is there going to be enough? When you start looking at terrestrial versus sea, what's available, we're talking about the ongoing, 7 billion people. It's hard to even imagine that number globally. But when you start looking at trends and the percent of increase over just the next 25 years, and where are the areas that you're going to see more of that population increase? And is this increase going to happen a lot in areas where you already have countries that have a high subsistence on seafood products? So it's going to increase that much more, put that much more of a strain in certain areas. So it certainly engages the conversation when you look at wild caught versus aquaculture and what is available for the populations in those countries. So we've already talked about the amount of seafood that's coming into the U.S. Estimates range, approximately 90% was the latest I saw on the NOAA website. When you start looking at imports versus exports versus what's harvested here in the U.S. and look at the numbers. FAO has released their numbers stating that 50% globally of seafood consumed is aquacultured. We see that trend, same thing, happening here in the U.S. I hope you all had seen the FDA and EPA joint release back in January on our new updated seafood consumption advice. So this has been in the process for the last several years, just trying to improve the messaging that's going out. So we always keep an eye on the mercury issue and the concerns there with children and pregnant women. So you look at the science, and this was many years in the making of peer review, both internally to the agency, other sister agencies that we worked with, academic groups that look at these items. So we have a list of the best choice of seafood, and then going down from there, the ones to avoid, the ones that have more of a mercury contribution. So those are the ones that we say, pregnant women or childbearing intend to become pregnant, and then small children, avoid those species. But the best choices, since we're already working kind of a safety factor with this, the best choices, people have already expressed to us that they already eat a lot of these. I think 8 of the 10 most consumed species in the U.S. are already within the best choices area. So people are already eating those fish on a more regular basis for those that are doing it, but we want to increase the amount of servings per week. So if we really get behind and push the seafood consumption, what kind of strain is that going to put on the system then, because we're asking people to eat more seafood? So from our standpoint for seafood safety, government websites, the addresses can be quite long and tedious. So to keep it simple, we created an alias that you can find there, which is just the fda.gov/seafood. That takes you to the main jumping off page that we maintain within our Division of Seafood Safety, and has a bunch of different resources on there that kind of bring together a lot of information within our website. So you're going to have information that's going to deal with seafood HACCP. As you know, for our standpoint with seafood safety, we're looking at the primary processor. That's where we begin our inspections. So you're going to have all the information with the Seafood Hazards Guide. You're going to find that there. Information and quick links to imports and exports. As Mr. Dewey mentioned, the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. We have the information on our DNA testing, which I'll cover in a few minutes, which Dr. Paul had talked about. You're going to have information directly to consumers. So there's information there on selecting and serving, safe food handling, information on pufferfish. We even still have links from the Gulf oil spill on here. Occasionally we do have environmental releases, and so people still rely on that information for a framework on how to move forward if there were to be a closure, and then subsequently how you would assess the environment for reopening. And then we have our research section also, which again talks about the DNA and a bunch of the different activities that we're doing as an agency. So at the top of our page, we talk about new things that we were just launching. We recently just put out a new aquaculture seafood webpage. So we've added new guidance and information there. And then we have been exploring more the multimedia realm. We have more resources in-house at our capabilities. So we took the Q&A and information that we receive from industry or consumers where they have the most questions about the hazards guide and how to interpret that for safe seafood. We then took all that information and created videos. So we have more of a different way of presenting information that people may be able to learn from, because everyone learns a little bit differently, visual learners, et cetera. So we're happy to be able to launch new educational means, if you will. So this is just an example of the aquaculture webpage that you'll find when you go to the links. So there's basic facts. We do have information there about our foreign country assessments. So for the last almost 10 years now, we try to do one, maybe two as resources permit. We go overseas. We work with a foreign competent authority, whether that be in the Philippines, Taiwan. We've done work in Vietnam, in India. And so we're looking at the aquaculture side. We don't have direct oversight of aquaculture facilities or farms based on our regulations, but we do a lot on the outreach and education. So we want to be able to look at what are the best practices. So we've partnered with different groups to be able to get information out there. It's better to educate overseas and have them control an issue over there before it comes here, because then we're just chasing our tails here, trying to figure out where the issues are. So it's better to have confidence in the foreign system. But there's a lot of great information on this website, and it's ever evolving. We do have a email address. So our seafood HACCP at fda.gov, people email us and contact us that way also and ask for different information, resources, et cetera. So if there's any suggestions on how to improve it, we are certainly able to do that. The video series I had mentioned, this is an example of just one of them, but we have 6 different videos. There's the time temperature indicators. There's one about processors and storage control. We have information on vessel records for sclerotoxic species. So it's just a new way of trying to present that information and help the industry better understand the requirements. So besides the Seafood HACCP website, the naming is the second most visited site that we have. So when people have questions about what to name a fish, what is the proper thing that I can call this species? So we have our guidance on there that has a complete flow chart on how to select a name if there's not one there, how do you propose a name. We have people that recommend name changes. So we look at all the different information. On the bottom of the list, far right, you're going to find the scientific name. That is actually a hyperlink. So when you actually click on that, it'll take you to a secondary screen, and we have more information there. So it talks about any hazards associated with that species, where it's located in the hazard guide. If we've completed DNA testing on that particular species, you'll find that there. So there's a bunch of different side information for additional assistance. I'm going to talk about now. So with the naming, what we end up doing is we partner with different groups to review the information. We work with different agencies. So we'll work with NOAA, we'll work with CBP. We have international partners that'll help us when we're looking at a new species that may be coming in, what to name it, what is the most common name that's out there. So there's a lot of information and a lot of work that goes into selecting a name. It's not random by any means. This is an example of the DNA page. So when you go to the scientific name, if it's one that has been cataloged, you'll find this information. 2009, roughly, is when we really started to explore the DNA side for fisheries products to be able to help us better perform research, but also roll that into species identification, find fraudulent labeling, claims, substitution, et cetera. So what we ended up doing is we obtain whole fish. We take pictures, measurements, we collect the samples, and we have a MOU agreement with the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. And all of the species that are part of our DNA system are formally cataloged. So they are with the museum. So if we ever had to go to court, and if it was ever challenged to that extent, we could literally pull the fish out of the system and take it to court. So it's a very unique agreement, and we're glad we were able to set this up because it shows that we have a lot more control over what this is and how robust and powerful we believe it to be. We have also partnered with the University of Louisiana Lafayette. They have a taxonomist there who's working with us on the crustaceous side. It's been about 18 months, give or take, that we have launched a lot more in the crustaceous side, looking at crab, lobster, shrimp species. We receive complaints and information about mislabeling, about blending seafood products. So we are using this technique to try to sort a lot of those issues out. And then the import program, you see probably routinely on the news that FDA only looks at 1% to 2% of seafood. Kind of a misnomer. People tend to think that we just open the floodgates and 98% of stuff just walks through the borders and nobody cares. This is all highly scrutinized and screened. So we have a computer program that's been developed over the years that is aiding us greatly in looking at various components. There's probably 50 different parameters of risk of different degrees that are put into the system that helps us review upon entry. All of these entries start with customs. They go through the customs system, and then they're switched over to our import system, and that's when we actually can review even further. So we're looking at parameters such as foreign inspections that we've performed, any sampling that we've done at the border for surveillance, any evidence or information that we've received from other competent authorities and counterparts. Canada is a great one that will notify us if they found an issue on a product. We found an issue, it may get diverted, they may try to sneak it into your borders. We will put that into the system. We share information with different areas. If we receive environmental information, you get monsoon or flooding in Southeast Asia, something's happened, we can reset the system and increase it to a high level of scrutiny before it comes into the border. If we do find a problem with a firm, with a product, with a country, we have import alerts. We can stop product, and then it changes the game. Now they've gone from 1% to 2%, if you want to look at it that way, with scrutiny with the system to 100% review because we've already found a problem. So there are a lot of safeguards in place. And this is a very quick overview. I could spend all day talking about these topics, but that pretty much wraps it up.